Good. So yes, my name is Leon van Audenhove. I'm professor at VNZ Brussels and at University of the Western Cape. And I made a presentation to kind of situate a bit the research we have at the University of Western Cape and to introduce a bit the topic we're going to talk about today. We have a long-standing collaboration actually between three partners, University of Western Cape, VUB and UGent. And at the moment, actually, we try to work very closely together between three research institutes, two institutes in Belgium, IMEC Smith VUB and IMEC MICT UGent, which both actually work on very related topic being media innovation, communication, new technologies, and the relation between technology, society, and individual people with focus on user research, economics, and policy. VUB has a somewhat more qualitative approach to this problematic. MICT has a bit of a more quantitative approach to it. But in Belgium, we are conculegas. We compete and we work together. In South Africa, we are colleagues that jointly work together with the CoLab at University of the Western Cape. And the CoLab is a dedicated lab on social innovation and digital inclusion, both with a focus on research, but also with a very strong focus on community development, supported by government also to have this outreach towards the community and to actually engage in relation to ICT with local communities in South Africa. We collaborate on joint research, very strongly on methodology. I don't like research where Belgian researchers actually start to do research in developing countries. We much more believe in collaboration and in thinking about how can we translate certain methodologies from Belgium to the south, but also what do we learn from, for instance, the methodologies that we jointly generate or they generate in a South African context. How can we apply this in our context? And the research of Carleen Pokpas is really interesting in that sense that we learned a lot from her research for questions we are now asking ourselves in the Belgian context. I just made an overview this morning, even how long do we work together, and I actually see two phases of collaboration. A first phase started in 2006, and if you look at the projects, I will not go through them, but you see that up until about 2015, 2018, we were very strongly supported by VLIR, both in the IS and in other projects. Zonit, which was still with anthropologists also involved at the University of Ghent. The output of that, a couple of PhDs and two joint PhDs, Natasha Katunga and the PhD of Carleen Pokpas that we will discuss today. What's actually interesting, I think, is that since 2015-18, we've actually achieved in having now joint research as equal partners. And I'm really extremely happy with this shift. We are now supported by VUB and by BELSPO, but more and more we actually go for joint research initiatives. It's not fully official yet, but we are currently discussing an agreement between the University of Western Cape, VUB and UGent to start with 4 new joint PhD located in South Africa and 2 joint PhDs located in Belgium to start working from next year on topics all related to ICT for development, but really going to an intensification of the research we have together to start joint acquisition trajectories. So I'm really happy that, and I think that's also the aim of the VLIR. You start more as a development collaboration initiatives, and you end up being equal partners that jointly do research. We have still one joint PhD that's going to be finalized this year, and Wouter is present, I think, in this meeting. We have 6 joint PhDs in the pipeline, at least in the next coming years. Now, briefly to situate where we are, the work of Carlin is related to this discussion of digital divide and digital gender divide. And in that whole discussion, we've seen a move from focus on access. Do people have access to technologies? To do people have the skills, competences, and attitudes to work with that technology? And now more and more we look at how do people actually integrate this technology in their daily lives, and what are the benefits of doing that? Do they actually extract benefit of having access to certain technologies? And it's a bit the same in this discussion on digital gender divide. We used to talk about, do women have more access or less access than men? We know these statistics now. We talk much more on what are the gender dynamics between men and women. Do gender dynamics hinder skills acquirement? Do gender dynamics hinder competences or hinder the use of these technologies? And the work of Carlin very nicely focus on that theme. And there is a lack of understanding of the gender dynamics, especially in developing countries. Now, just a couple of words on a book I really like, and I think everybody interested in ICT in developing countries should read. It's a book that's actually published when Carlin was defending her PhD. And it's a book by Aurora Payal, which is a digital anthropologist from Erasmus University in Rotterdam. And she wrote this book, The Next Billion Users, Digital Life Beyond the West. It was published in 2019. I think 2019 also, Carlin, was the summer, August, you defended your PhD. It's a book which has been very, very influential in the donor community. And why? Because it actually questions what donors are doing. Payal says the development theories and the donors, they start from the idea that poor people are utility-driven people. Once you give poor communities access to technology, they will start to use this technology for economic betterment. They will start to use this technology for looking for jobs, checking on healthcare, to educate themselves, to integrate this in the small SMEs they run. And this will lead to technology contributing to development. What Payal says, well, this is wrong. Yeah, statistics and anthropological research show a totally different picture. If you give people access to technology, they start to use it just like in the West for entertainment, for romance, for pornography, for gaming, and for entertainment. So we have to look totally different at these types of technology. And so I'm going to move a bit faster. She says people will use it exactly in the same way as the West. So we have to think about leisure divides. We have to look at how people integrate this technology into their daily lives. And we have to start from the assumption that they don't use it in an instrumental way, but that they mainly will start using it for entertainment and other uses. And she says we have to look at the kind of three-tier digital divide. And the first is equitable access. Second is meaningful and diverse usages. And the third is differences in digital leisure. And what this third use, differences in digital leisure, one of the arguments she makes is that people in the South, poor people, very often don't have access to leisure or less access to leisure. There is a gender component to that, in that sense that women very often have less time to spend on ICT, and that is something that the work of Carlin also shows. What I don't like about the work of Payal is that she overemphasizes this leisure aspect of ICT use, and I think that the PhD of Carlin very nicely questions some of the assumptions of Payal, And also says, look, what we find in townships is a mix. We find a mix of instrumental use, where people use technology for and integrate it into their lives and actually make very functional use of this technology, but they complement this also with leisure. And this is gender stratified and it is age stratified. And so that's also why I like to discuss the work of Carlin in relation to this very influential author, because we actually nuance these overdrawn conclusions of Aurora Payal by the work that Carlin has been doing in townships in South Africa.